It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. Now, you could find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you reach out to me through my email, oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. Fascinating story today. We have Jonathan Schwartz, and I guess the title of the show is going to be called Hollywood's Shocking Fall from Grace. Oh, my God. He's part of this rehab center now, Altus Rehab in Encino, California. And he's got a book coming out and a film coming out about his life. You can find him on Instagram at The Real Jonathan Schwartz on IG. Now, this guy's story, man, I guess, he was one of those financial advisors, and he was dipping his hand in the cookie jar, got involved with some addiction there. But he's totally turned his life around now, and he's working here with these Altus Rehab to help other people who got caught up in addiction. Mr. Schwartz, are you there, sir?
I am here. I love the introduction. Thank you.
Well, the last guy was complaining that it was too long. Okay. Right, that's what I'm rushing through it now. I get nervous. Before you get into your story and Altus Rehab and all this kind of stuff and your Hollywood financial advising and stuff and your addictions and your fall from grace and all that, who is Jonathan Schwartz?
Great question. And I like to answer that question with who was Jonathan Schwartz is very different than who I am today. And the person that I was a person that wronged a lot of people that didn't deserve to be wronged. I grew up in upstate New York, the Catskills. Father left or abandoned myself and my younger brother when I was 4 years old. My mother was very young when she had us. She was forced to take 3 jobs to put food on the table, roof over her head. And she took out that stress on me, which resulted in a lot of childhood trauma that I suppressed inside me for 46 years of my 55 years here on this earth. I don't use my childhood trauma as an excuse for all the wrongs that I've done, but it is evidence-based literature that suggests it was a contributing factor to my maladaptive behaviors, including but not limited to my white-collar crime and to my ultimate addictions. The primary addictions was gambling, cocaine, cannabis, frankly, anything that I would try. Very impulsive. The Jonathan today is a gentleman here. As I say, I like to call myself a gentleman today. Frankly, I like to call myself a nerd today, who is just being of service to people like myself, people who struggle with mental health or addiction. And as a program director and a therapist, I love helping what I call my brothers and sisters struggling with the same substance use and mental health, and encourage them to do what I couldn't do, which was to ask for help and to be vulnerable and authentic and transparent. And had I asked for help, maybe things would have been very different for me. But I'm grateful that the way things unfolded for me, because without getting caught, ultimately, I wouldn't have had the time to put in and invest in myself and deal with my childhood demons so that they're no longer suppressed, and to go on and get my degree as a marriage family therapist and in addiction studies to help people like me. So the person today is just truly a nerd whose sole mission is to help others.
Yeah, but at one time you were like this Hollywood's most trusted financial advisor, right? Now, how do you wind up, I guess you went to college for some kind of financial advising, but how do you wind up like in those circles, the most trusted financial with Beyonce and Gwyneth Paltrow and Mariah Carey and these characters? How do you wind up there?
So growing up, I had 7 CPAs in my family, and I knew and they're cousins, not like, my father or anybody like that, but just my cousins. There were 7 CPAs, and I always knew that I wanted to be a CPA, frankly, because that was the only subject that I resonated with in high school. And ultimately, when I went to college, it was to earn my Bachelor's of Science in Accounting. Sometime in 1994 or 5, when I graduated college, I graduated college in 1991. But in 1991, I thought I would be ready when I graduated college to work for one of those cousins. He was a very well-respected entertainment business manager who focused on the music side of the business. And so I called him and I said, hey, I'd like to come work for you now. You told me I could work for you one day. I graduated college. I'm ready. He said, you're not ready. You're immature. You're irresponsible. What do you know about business management? He said, I suggest you go work for a public accounting firm and hone your analytical skills. And when I think you're ready, I'll give you a call. Now, at that time, I had a huge ego, so that's clearly hurt my feelings, right? But in hindsight, it was incredible advice. It was incredible suggestion. And so I worked in the financial district. I moved from New York to San Francisco for about 3.5, 4 years. In 1994 or 5, I can't recall exactly, he called me and said, you're ready. At that time in my life, I was married to my high school sweetheart, and we had our first of 3 beautiful sons. So we drove from San Francisco down to Southern California, and I started working for my cousin in the entertainment world. And I was the first one in his office and the last one to leave because I didn't want the word nepotism associated with me. And I got paid very little money, but I viewed it as an opportunity of a lifetime to learn from my cousin, who I at that time really respected. And I viewed it also as if I wasn't learning from him, I'd be taking out a FAFSA loan to go to grad school to learn more accounting and to learn more about the entertainment business management world. So I really appreciated the education that I got just by having him as my mentor. And I worked really hard. And then in 1999, his firm was acquired by Chase Manhattan Bank, now known as J.P. Morgan. And he said, do you want to get into family wealth investment banking? And I said, cuz, no thank you. I appreciate everything that you've provided me and my family with, the education, the time that you've spent to make me who I am today as a business manager. And I'd like to take a small book of business and join another business management firm. So he gave me his blessing. And in February of 2000, I joined GSO Business Management, not yet as a partner, but as a business manager. I had a small book of business that I was able to bring over. And from there, I just continued to work hard. I kind of schmoozed and networked with people in the industry, entertainment lawyers, business, other business managers, personal managers, agents. And before you knew it, I had this opportunity to meet with Alanis Morissette. And that was like my first opportunity to get my own client. And I mentioned Alanis Morissette because Alanis was the number one victim of my crime in terms of the amount of money I embezzled from her. But I took the meeting with her. And the irony behind taking that meeting is, let's say she interviewed about a little under 10 prospective business managers. I was the only one that brought visual aids, right? Like, that's the irony. Like, I was transparent at that time. And I said to her, this is what you're going to get from me every month. I'm going to show you, if you're thinking about going on a tour, I'm going to present you a touring budget. Here's what your profit margin looks like. Is this acceptable for you, or do we need to cut costs or try and ask the agent to get you some more money? Here's what a personal budget looks like. Here's where you're spending money. Here's the type of money you're earning from various sources. And she really appreciated that as I being the sole person who brought these visual aids. So she hired me, and that was like my first, like I said, real new client that I was able to get on my own. And then shortly after that, I got probably the biggest break in my young career. In 2000, when Linkin Park decided to hire me and my former partner, and they just took off faster than any other artist I've ever witnessed in the music world, and that put me on the map. And now I'm getting calls from all the A-list artists out there, their representatives who wanted to wine and dine me so that I could refer them business, and they would refer me business. And unfortunately, that's how the industry worked back then, and I'm sure it still works that way today. But from there, I was able to grow a nice practice, and I was really good at what I did, except for fast forward. Now my addiction starts a decade later, in 2010 when I start to gamble and I start to use drugs. And so that was who I was.
That's interesting. Because I assumed, like you dabbled in drugs in high school and throughout college and maybe gambling. But no, it didn't start till 2010. But you were a workaholic. You were addicted to work, though.
I was addicted to work, but that's a good point that you raised. So yes, I did smoke marijuana, but I was able to do it moderately. I did use cocaine, once or twice a year for a few years prior to my full-blown addiction. I was able to do that as well in college moderately. In college, though, a little funny story, it was the first time that I gambled. And I didn't gamble per se. I came up with this genius idea, or at least I thought it was a genius idea. Let me and my fraternity brother become bookies on campus for the Greek system. Well, let me say this. We were the only bookies that lost money. So not only did we lose money, but we lost $10,000. My responsibility was $5,000. His responsibility was $5,000. So $5,000 to me, growing up poor, was something like worth $1 million today. Mm-hmm. I couldn't afford to pay it. So what did I do? And this is where my poor maladaptive patterns and behaviors started to be born. I left SUNY Albany in New York, and I transferred to San Francisco State to finish my last year and a half, because my mother lived up there. And that was like my first entree of really gambling. And I didn't gamble for a while after that. And I started to gamble. I think I gambled when I started to work for my cousin's firm. His partner let me place a bet. I lost $3,000. That $3,000 was paid for kindly by my cousin's partner. And again, still in moderation. But now there's some signs out there that, hey, wait a second. You got to cut this out. You can't gamble. You can't use drugs. You just don't want to get there. Your career is on this upward trajectory. Why would you risk the negative consequences? And so, so I heeded to that self-talk, and I didn't gamble again or really start using drugs again until 2010.
Until 2010?
Yeah.
When you were about 30?
Yeah, right. I'm 55 now.
Yeah, I can do a little math. I can do a little bit of math. My father was an accountant.
I can't do math anymore unless I have my 10 key with me, which I don't carry anymore.
Now, the Opperman math abilities ended with my father, both me and my sister and my daughter. Forget it. None of us even considered doing, or taxes or any other kind of stuff. We were hopeless. So now what happened in 2010 that made the drugs and the gambling become such a obsession or priority in your life? Because you took some extreme measures here. We're going to get to it in a little while.
So what happened was I was coaching I have three sons. I was coaching them all in youth sports. They grew up in Agora Hills, California. And one of the assistant coach of the Little League, it was called Pony Baseball here,
sure.
Asked me if I wanted to gamble on a game. He gambles. He's a professional poker player. And I said to him, sure, I'll place the bet. Why not, right? Let's just make this up. It was a $50 bet. Now, I lose the first week a significant amount of money. It was about $25,000. The $50 one day became $1,000, and progressively got worse because, now I'm becoming a full-blown degenerate gambler. And I don't like to use the word degenerate, but the truth is I was a degenerate gambler, in week 1, week 2 of gambling with him. And now I'm chasing the money. So now these bets become enormous. And while I was making really good money at that point in my life, I didn't want to take it from my bank account because my wife would find out, my partners perhaps would find out. I just didn't want anybody to find out. And that was also the start of me keeping this dark secret from everyone for the 6 years that I was on a gambling and drug run. So now I said I had this other genius idea, much like that genius idea of becoming a bookie in college. Let me just borrow money from a client. I have power of attorney. And so I borrowed, let's say, $25,000 from Alanis, And the only reason why I do mention her is because, as I said earlier, she was the only one of my 5 or 6 direct victims that went out publicly with this. The other ones I will not mention their names because I want to respect that they wanted their names sealed. They don't, and so today I live as a man with integrity as opposed to the Jonathan that once was with no integrity. And so, my intent was to pay her back the next week. Well, a week goes by, and now I'm in debt even more, so I borrow more money. And that went on for years until I decided that's enough taking from Alanis. Who else can I take from? And so I started to take from, like I said, about 4 or 5 other clients over this 6-year period of gambling every day, not missing one day. I gambled so much that when I turned over the phone records to the federal government, when I ultimately got caught, they said they calculated that I gambled $21 million gross over a 6-year period.
Well, Jonathan, let me ask you a question, man. You're a money guy, right? And you see you're losing money gambling. Something in your head didn't click and say, hey, this ain't the way to do this?
It did click. It clicked that I'm in a lot of trouble, inevitably.
Yeah.
But because I was afraid to take it from my account and be caught, I still had that big ego, and I'm thinking I'll be able to win this back. That's the mindset of a degenerate gambler. It's this grandiosity, this fantasy that it will take just one win, and I'll be able to pay them all back, and nobody will find out.
And some of these guys they're up. Some of these guys you see. I've lived in Vegas. I lived in Vegas 24 years. So I've seen a lot of this stuff. And some of these guys, they are up, and you ask them, well, do you make any money? Sometimes. You know what I mean? That's always the answer. But now, you said you were isolating yourself. So you didn't have buddies you were gambling or drugging with? You were doing this all by yourself?
All by myself. I hid this secret. Wow. It was the worst 6 years of my life, where literally, no exaggeration, I would go to sleep at night worried. I couldn't sleep. I needed to take sleeping aids because I couldn't believe that I was doing this to some people that I say this and people laugh at me like, you come on, be honest. I care deeply for my clients, both the indirect victims and the direct victims, yet I stole from them.
Yeah, come on. The guilt is there, man. I don't care how bad you are, even the baddest guy out there, whatever crime you're doing, especially when you're stealing from people that are individuals, you have to look them in the eye. There's guilt there with that stuff, man.
You're looking them in the eye. You're having meetings with them, and you're not presenting them. Like for example, with Alanis, I'm presenting her every month with those financials I promised her I would when she hired me, and yet I'm doctoring up those spreadsheets so that she can't find out that I'm really the money that I'm presenting to her is wrong. Had she asked me for a source document, the once a month I met with her, i.e. a bank statement, I would have been caught right there on the spot. In hindsight, I wish that was the case, but because I was weak and I didn't know, and I didn't believe at that time that asking for help was a strength, which I do believe very strongly today it is a strength, but then for me it was viewed as a weakness. And I had to pretend to the outer world that I was Superman. I was a successful, business manager, when deep down inside I had low self-esteem, insecure, low self-worth, all from that childhood trauma I mentioned. Yeah. But, I just, you're right. Like I wish I would have had that strength to ask for help. And I wish I would have, it's like I was like the shoe man who never cleaned his shoes. Yeah. So I can give great sound financial advice to others, but I wasn't taking it for myself and or certainly not protecting my family.
Now, Jonathan Schwartz, when I first saw, when your promoter, their PR guy, first contacted me, I assumed, okay, he came up with this scheme. He was creating fake invoices. He had these little LLCs all over the place, and trust. But not even. You were just taking the money and not reporting it.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Yeah, not only that, when I put my total amount... Well, exactly.
You weren't even trying to hide it, man.
No, and it's funny in some regard because the truth is when I, came back from prison, which we'll talk about, but when I re-entered society, my ex-wife and everybody thought I had $7 million because that's the amount I embezzled in total. under a rock or under a mattress. I wish I had $500 under a rock, under a mattress, because when I came home, I had zero assets and $0 to my name. So I only wish I was smart, like you suggested, and at least hid some money or, somehow had access to funds.
Yeah, because you can get away with
didn't.
this. Yeah, people do get away with this kind of stuff. But now, what about the drugs? You were doing the drugs alone, too?
Yeah, so probably about 6-7 months prior to getting caught in 2015, early 16, I just couldn't take it anymore. I mean, as I said earlier, those every day, if I heard a siren, I was scared they were coming to get me. I'm on the phone with my bookie every day, worried the FBI is listening. I mean, I was in really bad space. I was in incredible dark times. And so what happened was I started to have suicidal ideation. Like, I can't take this anymore. So and I have a coronary artery disease. So one day, my old assistant was at TGI Fridays with her friend, and the next day I said, how are you doing? What did you do last night? She said, I went to TGI Fridays with my friend, and this waitress asked us if we wanted to do cocaine, and we said, we don't do that. Ultimately, they went to the bathroom with this waitress, and they did cocaine. I said, great. That's an amazing story. Can you give me the number to that waitress? Because you know what? I think I want to do cocaine. And so now I start doing cocaine all day long, 24/7, for about 6 to 7 months. I wake up in wet, soaked sheets. My heart's racing. And here I am with this coronary artery disease. I'm having her cancel meeting after meeting. I wasn't giving clients the attention they deserved. And likely I was trying to kill myself, but thankfully I was able to identify reasons to live and my 3 beautiful sons. And at that time, my wife and my mother and stepfather and my brother. And I'm glad that I didn't ultimately have a plan and means to that plan to carry it out. But that's just all because I just didn't know how to ask for help.
So once again, though, Jonathan Schwartz, you got all this money. You're stealing money hand over fist. And your cocaine supplier is a waitress at, where was it again? TGI Fridays?
TGI Fridays.
That's your source? You're hanging out with Beyonce and Jay-Z, and your source for coke is a waitress?
Well, listen, I got to keep it under wraps. Who else am I going to go to?
It couldn't have been very good coke, right?
That's what I was just about to say. It was the worst cocaine I've ever had in my entire life. It had to be baking soda.
Yeah, right. No, okay, that brings me to another question, though, because you have it here in your press thing. You said you didn't want to mention other names, but you do mention Beyonce and Mariah Carey. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. They were
okay, so you're ripping off Beyonce, man. She's hooked up with Jay-Z.
No,
you're not afraid
no.
from sitting... What?
No. She was not a victim. There were these were just clients. So I represented Lincoln Park, like I said, not a victim. I represented Beyonce, Mariah, Gwyneth, not victims. But other clients that were victims, some professional athletes. There were 2 or 3 professional athletes and 1 or 2 other music artists. Gotcha.
Because I was going to say, man, how did you have the balls to rip off Jay-Z? But now you had the sense, okay, not to go after Jay-Z. Okay.
When in truth is, I didn't represent Jay-Z. I just represented Beyonce. They kept their finances separate with different business managers.
Close enough, though. You know what I mean? If she's pissed off at someone, I'm sure she has strings she can pull. How'd you get caught, bro?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I got caught because I became very careless because I wanted to get caught.
Yep.
So in 2015, when Atlantis fired me, I said to the bookkeeper, just hand over the financials, hand over everything we have. Like, if I was smart, which obviously now know I wasn't, I would have audited the financials. I would have changed the general ledger that showed, all the... I would have changed, my phone headpiece fell off. Sorry here.
No, you're fine. I hear you good.
I would have changed the general ledger to show, to not make it so obvious.
Yeah.
So I'm with Beyonce in Tampa Bay. She's preparing for her Lemonade tour. And I get a call from my partners, and they say that Alanis' new business manager, who, here's another irony, she hired my cousin's firm. He came back into the business management world after working, and Chase Manhattan Bank, and he opened up a new firm, and she hired him. So his firm discovered that I embezzled $4.6 million from her.
And so when I get that call, in Tampa Bay, helping Beyonce launch her tour at rehearsals, I continue to lie and be dishonest, right? Because that's what people in addiction do. They lie and they're dishonest and manipulative. And I was. And I said to them, I don't know about this 4.6. And she told me I had to come up with concoct some story that she was going to invest in a cannabis business, of all things, right? So that was my first of a string of lies that followed. And I flew back. I told Beyonce I have to leave. I have a personal matter to handle. And I leave, and I come back, and my partners confront me with their lawyers. And they say, well, if you can't get her to sign a document, we're screwed. Well, now I lie again. I say, I'll get her to sign a document, knowing darn well there's no way she was going to sign a document, nor no way that I would present her with a document to sign. So I say to them, like a big shot, hey, I'll take a lie detector test. No problem. So now call it the next week. I'm in Santa Barbara, which is about an hour from where I live in Agora Hills. My wife and I are celebrating our 23-year anniversary, and I get a call from my former partner.
Wait, did you have kids too?
We had 3 beautiful boys.
Oh, God, 23 years marriage. And how old were your kids at that time?
So my oldest, let's put it this way. Right now, my oldest is 31, my middle son is 29, and my youngest is 21. And my younger son was, they were all very, very hurt by all this.
Yeah.
I really destroyed and ruptured my family dynamics and hurt my loved ones so much. And that was the hardest part of this, when this became public. And how it became public was in Santa Barbara. My former partner called me and he said, you remember how you said you'd take a lie detector test? Well, we want you to come down to Beverly Hills and meet one of the former FBI agent polygraphers who's now retired. I said, okay. So now I got to hang up the phone in this hotel room, and I have to tell my wife for the very first time what I've done for the last 6 years.
Over the phone?
Every day. No, well, she was with me in the hotel, but when I hung up the phone with my former partner.
Right.
So now she, to my surprise, was very supportive, and I told her, listen, I'm just going to take a few moments, and I'm going to Google how to beat a lie detector test. Really? How to beat a lie detector test? So next day, I go down, I get in the car, and I say to her, I'll be back, honey. You go to the spa. I'm just going to go beat this former FBI agent polygrapher at his own game. And what I do is I bring a whole bunch of cocaine with me in the car, and I place my last bet with my bookie on that day. And it was May 8, 2016, because my sobriety date's May 9, 2016. And I'm snorting cocaine the whole ride. Okay, who goes to a lie detector test high on a stimulant like cocaine? Yeah. But this degenerate right here talking with you now. And so I get there, I put my feet up on his desk, I put my reclining chair back, and I'm saying, okay, let's go. Here we go. I'm going to beat this. Still, obviously, high in ego. And I think this guy likes me. We're establishing some rapport here. He's asking me questions. It's like 2 hours. I'm feeling like he likes me. I'm like, let's do this. So he hooks me up. I leave there. I call my wife. I say, I'm heading back to the hotel. Let's enjoy our evening. Well, when I get back, I also try to access my computer from a laptop to work, and I realize no longer do I have access to work emails. So now I'm in trouble.
Well, let me ask you a question. Before the polygraph, right, didn't you think, hey, let me find the best criminal lawyer in town, maybe a savvy PI to kind of maneuver me through this mess?
So I did. The moment
before the polygraph, though. When you first start getting wind that things are going south.
So I did. I retained who's now the Los Angeles District Attorney, who was one of the most incredible criminal attorneys. He's the District Attorney now of Los Angeles. His name is Nathan Hochman. I did hire him prior to that phone call because I just knew inevitably I was going to get caught. But I never told him I was going to do the lie detector test until I received that call. So I had to come clean with my wife and tell her literally all the lies I've been hiding for the last 6 years. And then, on May 10th or so, the story I got a tip that TMZ and all these other media outlets were about to present this to the world. And so I needed to tell my kids. before they heard it from the news. And so my wife and I flew to Chicago where my son was working, oldest son was working. Had to tell him. That didn't go very well. And then I told my two other kids when we flew home the next morning. And, I traumatized my children. Yeah. My children are my best friends. Today, I speak to my younger son every day. I just visited him in Spain where he was studying abroad. My middle son doesn't communicate with me. My older son communicates with me about 4 times a year, and he calls me Jonathan. But, in recovery, I look at this very differently. They don't talk to me today because of what I did. I hurt them and how they feel about it. How am I to try and convince them otherwise? That's the old Jonathan. This Jonathan accepts that he really hurt his family. And one day I believe that my 2 older boys will come back into my life when they're ready. They know I love them more than anything. And I don't expect anyone, including my loved ones, to trust what comes out of my mouth. But I hope that they can see that today this Jonathan is all about recovery, and I'm doing the next right action, as they say in the program. I'm doing the best that I can do every day to be a better version of myself and let the action speak, because I wouldn't trust my mouth if I were them either. Too many lies were told to them.
Biggest loss you can lose, children's faith in you. Who do you think tipped off TMZ?
I don't know. Probably Alanis, probably her team. I don't know, gotcha. But it is what it is at this point. And honestly, I never really viewed or read much of what was written about me because I was in such a dark place, knowing that I faced 23 years in federal prison.
Why was it federal? Wire fraud.
Wire fraud. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a problem.
Crossing state lines.
Yeah. All right. So, you fail a polygraph. How soon till was there an arrangement, or they just came knocking on your door?
So thankfully, Nathan was such a good attorney that he immediately started to negotiate a plea agreement with the prosecution. And they agreed to a 4 to 6 year plea agreement. Now, even though I was facing 23 potentially, I was nervous with 4 to 6 years, right? I never envisioned myself being in prison. So at sentencing on May 3rd, 2017, I'm hoping we get no more than 5 years. We asked for 1.5 years, and the judge wanted to give me more than 6 years.
Wow.
And I'm very grateful that she gave me 6 years. Today I can say that. On May 3rd, 2017, I was a wreck when I heard 6 years. But today, as I reflect upon it, I deserved the consequences of my poor choices. And to be honest, prison allowed me the time to really reflect on those poor choices and to reflect even more on how much I hurt not just my beautiful kids, but my wife. She didn't deserve any of this. The community I lived in, my partners, my employees, the entertainment community. I hurt endless amount of people. And today I don't live in my past, but I also don't forget my past.
Now, 6 years, I guess you had to do about 90% of that time, right? Federal time.
So I did, in total, I've given the government over 9 years of my life. I did 14 months on pre-sentencing, where I had to call in every day to take random drug tests. I did 33 months incarcerated in 2 federal prisons, one in Sheridan, Oregon. They had a residential drug and alcohol program, which took a year off my sentence, so 72 became 60 months. Then COVID hit, and I was able to be released early, but I had to do 16 months of home confinement with an ankle monitor, and then I served my 3-year probation. And in April, and so in August of last year, 2024, I was off of probation, and that's why I was able to travel to Spain to see my son a week or so ago.
How did you get along in prison? They say that the people that are successful outside of prison can be successful inside of prison. How was your experience?
The first 6 months, I'm not ashamed to say this because I believe crying is cathartic. I cried every day.
Sure.
I started to count the days And then someone came up to me who I'm very good friends with still to this day, an inmate. He said, you got to stop crying and you got to stop counting the days. So instead of counting the days, I started counting how many Super Bowls am I going to do in prison. And what I also wanted to do was give back. So I worked in the education department there. I taught accounting classes to the inmates. I helped them with their GED. And I taught one of the most beautiful classes that I could have ever asked for. A CO asked me, correctional officer asked me if I would teach a victim impact class to inmates every 7 or 8 weeks to 9 inmates. And I did that for over a year. And that was a beautiful class because I'm trying to get these inmates to hold themselves accountable, that they have victims of their crime, regardless of what their crime was. The white-collar guys, it took about 2 to 4 weeks to kind of get them to hold themselves accountable. The drug dealers had a hard time with it. Their response, generally speaking, was, well, if I didn't sell drugs to them, Jonathan, someone else would have sold drugs to them. Okay, that's true. But the point, what's even more true than that is you did sell drugs to them. So you don't know who became an addict as a result of you selling drugs to them. And you also don't know who died from an overdose that you sold drugs to.
Or died in a drug rip-off or whatever. There's all kind of problems with the drug dealing. Well, what
exactly.
about Jonathan Schwartz, though, real quick? They got drugs in prison. They got gambling in prison. So when you first get in there, were you still, what do they call it? Still not
craving?
Not before recovery. You weren't in recovery yet when you got there, right?
No, I was. I started my recovery a year before I went away.
Okay. So you were tempted in there for drugs and gambling inside?
No, and you're right. There was a lot of drugs in prison. There are a lot of drugs in prison, a lot of contraband from the outside. I had 0 disciplinary actions taken against me in prison. I became a nerd in prison because I realized something I didn't recognize when I was doing all the wrongs. I didn't take a moment to accept that or ask myself the question, what is the negative consequences of my choice? Okay, today, through cognitive behavioral therapy, there's 2 choices to every choice I make today. What's the negative choice, the irrational one? What's the rational or positive choice? And that's the clinical therapist talking here to you now. But today, when I make choices, for the most part, I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But I am proud of who I've become and becoming. I make the rational choice today. So I started to recognize the negative consequences. If I were to get in trouble in prison, that's going to extend my time in prison, and that's going to mean it's going to disconnect me from my family for a longer period of time. I'm already going to be disconnected from them for this 6-year period. So I didn't want to do anything or participate in any of the gambling or drugs or fighting or any of that.
No, what about when you're inside? Was your wife, did she have to go start working? Did she work before? But her life must have been turned upside down.
Her life, along with my kids' life, was completely turned upside down. She, my mother and stepfather, my brother really stepped up to help the kids and help her financially. Ultimately, she started to become like a Reiki instructor, a yoga instructor, and she really rolled up her sleeves. And but the kids are traumatized as a result of it. And we were divorced prior to me going in, obviously.
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, she divorced me, rightfully so, because not only did my crime come out, but my infidelity, and all the other things that I did that were wrong. So she was, in hindsight, I can tell you today, she's a wonderful woman who deserved a lot more than I provided her. And thankfully today she's happy. And to be honest, that's all that's important to me. And my kids are healthy, and that's what's important to me.
So when you were inside, did you have any support outside? Your parents, your family, the ex-wife?
So no, my ex-wife, no. She doesn't want to have any relationship with me. It started then and continues, and I understand that. My mother is battling stage 4 lung cancer for over 10 years, and she's my rock, and she visited me often. My younger son visited me about 3 or 4 times, and then when I transferred to California federal prison, it was a private federal prison called Taft, no longer exists. My kids came once or twice as well, which was incredibly the happiest time of my period in prison, just to be able to give them a hug. And those are really the only visitors I had. I had a couple friends that visited from time to time, but I didn't really have a lot of visitors.
Yeah, but what about phone calls and letters and stuff, packages? Did you have that?
My mother sent me about $250 a month to add to my commissary. I'm vegan.
Me too.
And I say that because it was really hard to be. Are you?
Yeah. Like 6 or 7 years.
So it was really hard to be amazing. So
even,
for me, it's 14
even more,
years.
10 years now. Yeah.
I ate beans and rice for the first two years, and then I had oatmeal cookies that happened to be sold at the commissary that were vegan. And then some of the guys, they hustled, so they'd make me like a vegan burrito with beans and rice. And so it was tough to eat, but that's how I got the money on the books. And then you have 15 minutes per phone call. So that money that my mom sent was also used for me being able to email or call my younger son and my mom.
So those are the only people you stayed in
really
contact, your son and your mom?
Yeah, my youngest son and my mother.
It's amazing. You're on the outside. You got all that money, man. You got a million friends, And then things go south. Yeah.
You learn who your real friends are.
Yep.
And it's an interesting story, if I can. I'd like to share this. It's really crazy story. So when the media came out with this story, I was seeing an Eastern Western medicine doctor. And he called me and he said, Jonathan, I want you to show up at this house. Just wear a black suit. And I said, okay. I have no idea why he's asking me to do this. So I show up at this house the next day in a black suit. And I walk into this house, and I know nobody. And in the backyard of this person's house is a rabbi giving a eulogy at a funeral. I'm thinking, oh, my God, the doctor's not here yet. I'm going to go sit in the back. Doctor shows up, called 15 minutes later. I said, Doc, what is this? He says, this is a staged funeral. I said, a staged funeral? He says, yes. The person who owns this home, he's upstairs watching these people, hearing what they're saying about him because they believe he's dead because he feared death and he wanted to know what people would say about him at his death. I'm like, wow, okay. So now we leave. The doctor says to me, Jonathan, what's your takeaway from this? I processed it for a moment, and my answer was this. In the height of my career, had I died, maybe 600 plus people would have attended my funeral. Of those 600 plus people, let's just say 98.5% of them were there at a profession, not because they cared about me, Jonathan Schwartz. Today, if I die, I'm lucky to have 50 people, but guess what? At my funeral, all 50 people there care about me and love me. And that was the first lesson I learned, to surround myself, which I practice still to this day, with quality inner circle of people who care for me versus quantity. Because I was all about wanting to be liked when I was in the entertainment space. Because of that insecurity, I was a people pleaser, never knew how to say no, always there for someone. And today I set those boundaries, and I ask my clients to set healthy boundaries because that's what it takes to maintain a sustainable recovery.
So now we're getting toward the end. So when you get out, how soon do you decide you want to make a career in with Altus Rehab, with helping people to recover and change their lives?
So when I first came out, I'm still to this day, and probably for the rest of my life, I'll be labeled as a felon to the outer world. I was well educated. I couldn't get a job. I took a job at Dunkin' Donuts. After 2 months of cleaning the counters and mopping the floors, I got fired. I wasn't apparently cleaning the countertops or the floors well. And then I took another job as an auto salesperson, and that's also didn't work out very well for me. And at that moment, I decided, let me help others. And I went to addiction studies school during COVID. I got ultimately my CADAC, Certified Addiction Drug Counselor certification, and then I went to grad school to become a marriage and family therapist with an emphasis in addiction and trauma. And so I can use both my academia now here at Altus Rehab as well as my life experiences to help people not make the same mistakes that I made. I also happen to work at another treatment center called the Chabad Treatment Center in LA, which is a Medi-Cal facility, and there I provide teletherapy. And it's the greatest joy I get out of life today is helping people as best that I can. And, you could try to help everybody, but not everybody wants to help. Mm-hmm. But those that want to help, I'm here for them.
Now, how did you manage to finance the schooling after getting out of prison and not having much connections besides your mom, I guess, right?
I applied for a FAFSA loan, and it's a $70,000 that I'm paying $600 and something a month toward.
Yeah,
and that's a lot of money for me today.
My daughter got all her loans forgiven, so we lucked out with that, man.
You're very lucky.
Yeah, right.
No, I mean, today I value $1 more so than I ever did in my life. There are days I want to go to Starbucks, but I just can't afford it to get a $5.95 soy latte. But all of these things are not complaints by me, because I accept that all of these consequences, those that I hurt and even myself, is a result of my poor choices.
I've known so many people in my life, they went through addiction recovery and then went on to become counselors, not with the kind of PhD and stuff like you have, but just they went to become rehab counselors. How much of it, when you have a new person come in, a new patient or a new client, how much of it do you rely on your own personal experiences, and how much do you rely on the schooling, the classes? Because some of these people take really no classes, just little trainings.
So the classes clearly built me the academic, the educational, doing internships and learning how to provide someone therapy. I couldn't do it just solely based on my experience. So the foundation is the academia part. As therapists, you really are not supposed to self-disclose much about yourself as a therapist to your client unless you believe it can help your client. And so I self-disclose in most every first session I have with a client that comes in, because because it's one of the hardest things for therapists to do is to build a rapport. Now they see that my mind works just like their mind. That's the beautiful part about my job, is I'm able to earn their trust and establish credibility with them, because they know that I have similar experiences. The war stories, as they say in the 12-step rooms, are very different. But at the end of the day, the beautiful part about being in a 12-step room is the commonality of one's mind with all the others in the room. And the same applies here in therapy.
What about some of these people, and I've been around a long time, and some of these people, they seem to get addicted to the program, and they're talking in that, the code language, in the 12-step meetings all the time. Do you ever need to break away from that and return to full-time regular society, or do you need to constantly be based in that kind of thing?
So it's a great question. I don't preach the 12 steps. I don't preach anything to anybody. Who am I to preach? Yeah. But what I do believe in is that the 12, and I'm not a big book thumper. I don't. But I do, when I sponsor people, and I sponsor a lot of people, I don't ask them to read the entire book. But if they want to, they're certainly welcome. I take them through the steps like my sponsor took me through the steps. I rarely use cliches from the program, but I really do believe that Gamblers Anonymous saved my life. And I don't go to 4 or 5 meetings a week like I used to when I was in earlier recovery. I go to 1 meeting a week, and I love it. I feel great there. I'm in a room with guys and gals that struggle with the same addictions. Many of us have, secondary or third addiction like I do. And it's just a place where I enjoy going. It's just another way of being of service, not just to others, but to myself. Mm.
Now, we've only got a few minutes left, about 5-6 minutes, right? So if somebody's listening to this show right now and they says, you know what, man, this guy sounds really cool, this guy, Jonathan Schwartz. I like his personality, his experiences here. He seems to be a very smart guy. And I want to break out of my addictions and get some treatment. What would you tell them to do? Maybe they don't live in Encino. How would they reach out to you for help?
They could reach. Yeah, I would ask them to reach out for help, and they could reach out to me by going to my professional Instagram at @TheRealJonathanSchwartz and message me. And if we here at Altus can help them, we would love to take them. And if we can't help them for whatever the reasons are, because we have people that come from all over the country and even out of the country, then I'll refer them to some treatment center that they could afford or their insurance takes. But at the very least, I could be here to help them over the phone in that moment. And I will call them.
What about people that don't have insurance? What do you tell them?
So, like, Chabad is a Medi-Cal facility, right? So if you have Medi-Cal in California, you can go get some great treatment at the Chabad Treatment Center. And if you don't have insurance and if you can't afford to pay for it, there are other places I could refer you to.
Okay, and then what would the process be like? Okay, like I'm all hungover, right? And I owe money all over town, right? And I show up. When I get to the rehab, what are they going to do to me when I get there?
we're going to not judge you.
Yeah.
We're going to support you, and we're going to help you leave Altus Rehab with all the tools that you need to maintain a sober life and have the freedom that sobriety affords you. And that's what we will do. And not just work. I don't believe that we just work on the addiction part of what you're struggling with. Like in my case, and others that come to treatment, many people who come here have childhood trauma, adverse childhood experiences. Let's work on that so you don't suppress your emotions and trauma the way I did for 46 years. Let's have you leave here with all your trauma or experiences resolved and all the relapse prevention skills and tools that you need to be sober and live, for the first time, a meaningful life. Because that's, for me, this is the best experience I've ever had. I today live a meaningful life.
Yeah, it's like night and day, man. If you can get that stuff behind you, there's a whole world out there that you can really live. You feel better, you think better, you have better relationships with everybody. It's just a better way to go, man. And it seems like when you said we were in that spiral of gambling every day and you're chasing that big win, that's a suicidal spiral, man. You're just, every day you're killing yourself. You're not trying to get out of it, man. You're going deeper into it. Yeah.
No, sadly, that's why I had this suicidal ideation.
Yep.
And gambling, by the way, even though it's a behavioral addiction, is the number one addiction that correlates to suicidality because you're dealing with your finances.
That's true. Ah, boy. But you know what? I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. I know it's not easy coming on here and reliving all this kind of stuff. And then even before you do the interview and then after the rest of your day, I know this stuff lives in your head. But Jonathan Schwartz, we're talking about Altus Rehab and Jonathan Schwartz. You can find him at Real Jonathan Schwartz on Instagram. He got a movie and a book coming out. What do you want to leave us with?
Alan, first I want to say thank you for having me here and being able to speak to your audience. I really respect you and what you're doing, and it's an honor to be here. And I just want people to please have the courage to be vulnerable and please ask for help because you're worth it.
Also, real quick, too, now what about like the corruption in the rehab industry? Anything you want to warn people about getting involved in this? I know there's like kickbacks and all kind of stuff goes on with the insurance. Anything you would warn people about that?
Yes, research the facility you're going to. When you call an admissions line at any treatment center, including Altus, ask a million questions. Go on their website and look at the reviews. Make sure the reviews are verified, but really ask questions because this is your life. And this is a very important decision where you're going to seek treatment.
Gotcha. Jonathan Schwartz, thank you, Schwartz. Yeah, I almost did it. Jonathan Schwartz, almost made it, man. Altus Rehab, that's Altus Rehab. And once again, it's in Encino, California, but you can get a hold of him on the Real Jonathan Schwartz on Instagram, and he'll set you in the right direction. Mr. Schwartz, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Opperman. It's my pleasure. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.